And I have no higher priority than making America affordable again. That's what we're going to do. And again, they caused the high prices and we're bringing them down. It's a simple message. If I had one message tonight, this is being covered like all over the world. This is crazy because I haven't made a speech in a little while. When you win, you say, oh, I can now rest.
So yes, as you just heard, Trump was in Pennsylvania, Monroe County, and he gave a rally, and he's really attacking this whole affordability crisis that the United States has been under ever since the pandemic, really. During the Biden administration, prices rose everywhere. It was ridiculous. Go to a grocery store during Biden's term, prices would dramatically increase. It was insane. The fact that we had a retarded president, made it worse. The Biden administration also passed all these ridiculous spending bills that didn't benefit anyone except for the bureaucracy. And that increased the inflation because we were printing money that we didn't have. So the whole Biden administration totally fucked up inflation. And that's why Trump got back into office. Now, the problem the Trump administration has been facing is, while the inflation rate hasn't gone up during Trump's first year back in office, you got to understand, with the inflation rate, just because it doesn't change, the rate, that still means inflation is increasing, right? Because it's the rate, right? Like if you gain 5% fat each year, you're still gaining weight. Even if the rate is the same, you're still gaining weight because you're gaining 5% fat each year. So even though the inflation rate's about the same from when Trump got into office, that still means prices have increased over the last year. And people elected Trump because they thought he'd be able, at the very least, to get prices to stabilize and bring back the economy everyone loved during his first term. And, I think Trump's messaging, as I played in the clip at the beginning of this segment, focusing on the fact that the Democrats caused the affordability crisis and he's trying to fix it, that's a winning message. It reminds folks why they put Trump back into office, because it is true prices increased under the Biden administration. Now, it's not just his fault. COVID's a big factor, and obviously Joe Biden didn't make it's not him who created the virus in China, so, you have to be fair. But he did do a lot of spending bills, the big back, all these ridiculous bills, Build Back Better bill, all these terrible spending bills that didn't help anyone. And like I said, it just forced us to print more money that we didn't have, which increased the inflation. That's one of the biggest causes of inflation is, you literally increase the money supply by printing money. And the Biden administration did that in spades. And that's a big reason why we had an increase in inflation. So the Trump administration has a tall task. And, part of the problem and part of the reason Trump's poll numbers fell for a bit is because of the fact that, these tariffs, unfortunately, the press has successfully villainized tariffs. They've made tariffs, they've successfully smeared tariffs. And in all fairness, though, when the Trump administration uses tariffs as a way to, basically do de facto sanctions on other countries, people do not want to pay $1 more for coffee beans if the purpose of the tariff is to punish India, let's say, because they're buying Russian oil. Like no one wants to pay higher prices for that. If you have to pay like $1 more, and that's the price to pay to bring back manufacturing jobs so we're less reliant on China, that's a different question. I think more people are sympathetic to that. Now, that being said, even with the tariffs, we have not seen, like I said, the inflation rate's about the same. And there have been aspects where Trump has gotten costs down, like energy, for instance, which is a big driver of costs, is energy. In most states, particularly if you don't live in a ridiculous blue state like California, gas prices have gone down dramatically in most states. I mean, there are some states where you can find it under $2 a gallon. So there has been some success. Egg prices have gone down overall during Trump's first year back into office. There are individual success stories, but more work has to be done. But the messaging is getting better for the Trump administration, which is good because Republicans got shellacked last month in the off-year elections. And the messaging has been better since, and in fact, Trump's approval rating has picked up in certain polls. According to Rasmussen reports, Rasmussen was one of the most accurate polls during the 2024 election cycle. They do a running sort of, what's the word for it? They have a tracking poll, And last night, Trump's approval hit 53.72%. It moved his 5-day rolling average by 2 points just by that. His approval rating increased in Harvard-Harris. He was at 47% approve, only 49% disapprove. And in the Harvard-Harris poll, it was asked who has done a better job as president, Trump versus Biden. 53% of respondents said Trump. 47% of respondents said Biden. So Trump led. This is an important question because she's the president Trump replaced. More people still think Trump is doing a better job than Joe Biden by 6%. That's an increase, by the way, from when they asked this question a few months ago. So, and if you look at Real Clear Politics, Trump's approval rating is still higher than Biden's was at this point, and it's higher than Obama's was at this point in his second term, and George W. Bush. And again, and also in Real Clear Politics, his approval rating is starting to tick up again because of the new Rasmussen poll, Harvard-Harris poll, and some other data that's coming in. So it does look like we're seeing maybe a little bit of a rebound for Trump's approval rating. And that could be because of the better messaging. Again, even this interview with Politico, he made it clear that he's focused on the United States. So we'll see. The reality is he's sort of where you would expect for a typical second-term president in terms of his approval rating. That's not great because most of our presidents we've had the last, 40 years haven't been particularly good. Pretty much every president between Reagan and Trump, I don't really care for. I think they're either mediocre or just bad. Bill Clinton's probably the best one in between them. If I had to, maybe George H.W. Bush. I don't know much about his presidency to be a one-termer. I don't know much about it, but, Obama, terrible president. W. Bush, terrible president. Joe Biden, terrible president. So like I said, between Trump and Reagan, I don't have much love for any of these presidents that came between them. Except for Trump himself, right? The non-consecutive terms. If we're counting Trump's first term as a separate term, then yes. That'd be the one exception to the Trump-Reagan rule is Trump himself, his first term. But other than that, I'm not much love for the other presidents in between. So, but like I said, and look, to be fair, Trump has done a good job overall as president. And the fact that we're having data that suggests that at least even Americans aren't happy that they recognize he's doing a better job than Joe Biden is good because he has closed the border. He's gotten that under control. He got the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. He got the Israeli hostages back, which was huge. Like I said, he's got energy costs down. We're drilling more. He extended his tax cuts, which, because of that, if those tax cuts haven't been extended, he would have had one of the biggest tax increases on working class people like ever. And even though it's not perfect, he did get tax deductions for people who rely on tips, for Social Security. Trump has done a good job overall. Let's not and he is trying to get a peace deal done between Russia and Ukraine. He's at least attempting it. Going after these college universities is a good thing, not a bad thing, even though I don't agree with some of the particulars. Overall, though, it's moving in the right direction. And, Doge was a good concept. I think Elon Musk was unfortunately undermined by the bureaucracy, but trying to find stuff to cut was a good thing. So overall, look, with all the frustration you can have for him, the fact that he's president again is awesome. Because Joe Biden was a terrible president. Thank God Trump's the president again. He's done a good job, not necessarily a great job, but he's done a good job back in his second term. And hopefully he focuses more on affordability, and maybe we'll continue to see his poll numbers increase. Time will tell. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. Thanks for listening. Again, please subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the hell you listen to this podcast. I'd greatly appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. Bye-bye.